The Book of Syrach, Chapter 11. The wisdom of a man made meek shall enhance his head, and shall make him to sit in the midst of great men. Praise thou not a man in his fairness, neither despise thou a man in his sight. Verse 3. A bee is little among birds, and his fruit hath the beginning of sweetness. Verse 4. Have thou never glory in clothing, and be thou not enhanced in the day of thine honor. For why the works of the highest alone been wonderful, and his works been glorious, and hid and unseen. Verse 5. Many tyrants han seat in throne, and a man of whom was no supposing bar the diadem. Verse 6. Many mighty men been oppressed strongly, and glorious men been given into the hands of other men. Verse 7. Before that thou acts, blame thou not any man, and when thou hast acted, blame thou justly. Verse 8. Before that thou hear, answer thou not a word, and in the midst of elder men add thou not to speak. Verse 9. Strive thou not of that thing that diseaseth not thee, and stand thou not in the dome of sins. Verse 10. Son, thy deeds be not in many things, and if thou art rich, thou shalt not be without part of guilt. For if thou suest, thou shalt not take, and thou shalt not escape if thou rentest before. Verse 11. There is a man travailing, and hasting, and sorrowing, and unpiteous, and by so much more he shall not have plenty. Verse 12. There is a man fade, needy of recovering, failing more in virtue, and plenteous in poverty. Verse 13. And the eye of God beheld him in good, and raised him from his lowness, and enhanced his head. And many men wondered in him, and honored God. Verse 14. Goods and evils, life and death, poverty and honesty, been of God. Verse 15. Wisdom and learning, and cunning of the law, been anentest the Lord. Love and the ways of good men been at him. Verse 16. Error and darknesses been made together to sinners. For soeth they that maken full out joy in evil, wexeneld together into evils. Verse 17. The gift of God dwelleth to just men, and increasings of him shall have prosperities without end. Verse 18. A man that is made rich in doing scarcely, and this is the part of his meed. Verse 19. In that he saith, I have found in rest to me, and now I alone shall eat of my goods. Verse 20. And he knew that time passeth him, and death nayeth, and he shall leave all things to other men, and shall die. Verse 21. Stand thou in thy testament, and speak thou together in it, and wex thou eld in the work of thine heasts. Verse 22. Dwell thou not in the works of sinners, but trust thou in God, and dwell in thy place. Verse 23. For it is easy in the eye of God suddenly to make honest a poor man. Verse 24. The blessing of God hasteth into the meed of a just man, and the going forth of him maketh fruit in swift honor. Verse 25. Say thou not, what is need to me? And what good shall be me hereafter? Verse 26. Say thou not, I am sufficient, and what shall I be made worse hereafter? Verse 27. In the day of goods be thou not unmindful of evils, and in the day of evils be thou not unmindful of goods. Verse 28. For it is easy before God to yield in the day of death to each man after his ways. Verse 29. The malice of one of our making forgetting of most lechery, and in the end of a man is making naked of his works. Verse 30. Praise thou not any man before his death, for why a man is known in his sons. Verse 31. Bring thou not each man into thine house, for why many treasons been of guileful man. Verse 32. For why, as the entrails of stinking things breaking out, and as a partridge is led into a trap, either net, and as a capret is led into a snare, so in the heart of proud men, and as a beholder saying the fall of his neighbor. Verse 33. For he turneth goods into evils, and setteth treasons, and putteth a whim on chosen men. Verse 34. Fire is increased of a sparkle, and blood is increased of a guileful man. For why a sinful man setteth treason to blood. Verse 35. Take heed to thee from a guileful man, for he maketh evils, lest peradventure he bring it on thee scorning without an end. Verse 36. Receive thou an alien to thee, and he shall destroy thee in whirlwind, and he shall make thee alien from thine own ways.
So ends chapter 11.